All right. Happy Tuesday. Today's Tuesday. Tomorrow's not. We are going to have our class this week pre-recorded, as you are clearly seeing and watching yourself. And this week's Thursday night class is happening right now, and next week's class, God willing, will be as scheduled Thursday night at Chabad, 8 p.m. There is not yet a sponsor for today's class. If you would like to sponsor, please reach out to rabbi@jewisherie.com, or if you also would like the material for the class, the curriculum, or if you'd like to sponsor a future class, please reach out and let me know. Okay. Wait, almost forgot. Grab a coin. Grab your charity box if you have one. If you don't, please reach out. Again, take a coin or a dollar bill. Look at that. A mitzvah done brings incredible light and energy, godly energy into the world, making good things happen. Chaim. Can you say the Chaim on tea? I just did. Okay. The importance of knowing what's important to you. Do you know what is your purpose in life? How does this express itself in your order of priorities? A life lesson from Abraham and Sarah. Ironically, actually, this week's Torah portion is called Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. The ironic part is that she actually is not present in this week's Torah portion. She passed away. That's why it starts, this is the life of Sarah, because she had passed away. That's not for today's discussion, though. Okay. Today's class is based on two talks from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, one from 1982 and one from 1987, if I'm not mistaken. Little introduction. When the angel informed Abraham that at 99 years old he would have a child, the verse says that Abraham and Sarah were coming on in years. Bayamim, coming on in years. This is going to be a crucial wording in today's class. What does this phrase mean, and why is it so important for the Torah to tell us this? Section A. If you're following inside, great. If you're not, also great. Take it to heart. So first we're going to read two verses, one in Genesis chapter 18 and the one in Genesis chapter 24. Source 1 says, now Abraham and Sarah were old, quote, coming on in years. Okay. Source 2, Abraham was old, coming on in years, and God blessed Abraham in everything. So we see that the Torah describes Abraham and Sarah being old and coming on in years. And then 6 chapters later, it describes Abraham, not Sarah, because she had already passed away, Abraham as coming on in years again. What does the Rebbe say? Now he's old? In the previous Torah portion of Vayera, last week's portion, the verse already said Abraham and Sarah were old coming on in years. If they were old already before Isaac was born, then now at the time of the binding of Isaac, 38 years later, Abraham was certainly old and coming on in years. Why then does the verse in our Torah portion need to state that Abraham was old? It's very strange. We had already learned in last week's portion that Abraham and Sarah were old coming on in years. And then, not too much later, 6 chapters later, a number of years later, it says that Abraham was old coming on in years. Wasn't he already doing that? Why does the Torah repeat a second time? So we first need to understand the meaning of the words ba bayamim, coming on in years. The school teachers always explain that this means extreme old age. Meaning Abraham wasn't just old, he was coming on in years, with additional years on top of his old age. He was exceedingly old. But the truth is that this explanation isn't good enough. It's not viable. Why? Because King David is also described as being old, coming on in years, and he only lived to the age of 70. Certainly not an extremely old age. So what does this phrase coming on in years actually mean? Rather, says the Rebbe, we can explain that coming on in years is actually meant literally, the actual literal meaning of the words. Ba bayamim in Hebrew, we're translating it as coming on in years. That's not exactly the right translation. It's fairly good, but the literal translation is that he came into the years. Well, literally means coming into days, but he came into the years. Like we would say about someone that came into the house, meaning that this isn't a description of the number of years, the physical years on the calendar, the physical years on the passport, but a description of the person's lifestyle during those years. This means that he entered the years and events that he experienced. We're going to explain this. These weren't just passing events that left no impression on him. Rather, he entered every day and every event and lived with them, taking them to heart. All of the days impacted him. The good ones made him happy, and the negative ones had the opposite effect. This even leaves a clear mark on the features of the person's face. We can see this clearly in the fact that there can be two people who are the same age, but one looks older than the other. This is because the effects of the life experiences of the older looking one are apparent in his appearance because he took every event to heart. It's not the same. It's not the same thing at all. It's a different. It's coming from a different place. But there is a funny picture that I have seen in the past of a. It's not funny. It's sad, but it's comical. Of an old man sitting on a bench, and there's like words on it that says, "Hey, Howard. How old are no?" He said, "How do you take care of your health? And you look so young and vibrant." Clearly, an old man, and he says, "Well, I never took care of my health. I ate terribly. I smoke every single day. I drink excessively." And he goes on and on and on. The other person says, "That's crazy. And you did all this, and you don't look that old." But just question, by the way, how old are you? He says, "Oh, I'm 23." Anyway, so the events of a person's life, the ones that they take to heart, actually affect them, and what's the word I'm looking for? It catapults them into change, one way or the other. But it also, those events that one takes to heart actually change their physical appearance on their face, even. This is why King David is described as coming on in years, even though he only lived to 70. Because the many tribulations, I don't know how to pronounce it. For those of you who watch our classes, I don't speak English. All the many tribulations he endured, including numerous wars, aggravation from his sons, and so on, left a mark on him, making him coming on in years. So some people have less turbulent lives, without wars and such. There are also people who take things less to heart. But some people have endured a lot in their lives and taken it all to heart, and this can be recognized in their appearance. King David belonged to the latter category of people. He endured many tribulations during his life, wars with external and as well with internal enemies. He also suffered aggravation from some of his sons, and he took all of this to heart. So even at the relatively young age of 70, he was called coming on in years. He had endured a great deal and had entered, quote unquote, those events and internalized them. So again, coming on in years doesn't mean the person is physically old. The person can be physically young. Coming on in years means that the events that took place in their life weren't just events that took place. They were events that the person entered into them. They entered into that time, into that space, into that energy, into that emotion, those feelings, those experiences, and it left its mark on the person. It didn't just fly by and move on. Based on the above, says the Rebbe, we can understand why the verse in our portion states that Abraham was old, coming on in years, even though the verse in the previous portion already stated that Abraham and Sarah were coming on in years. Why does it say it a second time? It is natural that as a person ages, they become more wise and mature, and they stop taking every event so seriously. In addition, older people have also endured a lot already, so they tend to no longer ascribe much weight to external events. They don't care as much. It's not so important. It doesn't rock their day as much as it might have in the past, whatever the thing is, good or bad. Therefore, even after it had been stated that Abraham and Sarah were old, coming on in years, Because of the many things they endured, it is still necessary to inform us that even 38 years later, Abraham was old, coming on in years. In other words, while most people, the older they get, the less they take things to heart, Abraham was still at it even 38 years later. Now, the reason why Abraham was still taking events to heart 38 years later is because the most important events of his life occurred during this period, including the birth of Isaac and the binding of Isaac. So even though the Torah already told us that Abraham was coming on in years at age 100, it repeats the statement when he was 138. Naturally, elderly people take things less to heart, as we said, either because they are more mature or simply because they've been through so much already. The Torah wishes to tell us that this wasn't the case with Abraham. He continued to come on in years and take everything to heart, even at such an advanced age. The reason for this is that he experienced very important events during this time, such as the binding of Isaac. Okay. Based on the above explanation of coming on in years, that the person came into them and was impacted by them, we can better understand the Zohar's explanation of this expression. The Holy Zohar, written by the great sage Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai lived, over 2,000 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Around 2,000 is for sure correct. Around 2,000 years ago, he's actually the only sage mentioned literally in every tractate of Talmud. And he was a very, very holy person, very holy. So he was the author of the content of the Zohar, one of the original books of Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism. The Zohar has a very interesting explanation to these words. The Zohar explains that it means that all of the days of the person's life were completely devoted to divine service without missing a single day. Based on the above, the Zohar's explanation of coming on in years shouldn't be seen just as an allusion, not illusion like a magic trick, but allusion with an A in the beginning. Allusion is like a hint. It is based on the literal meaning of the verse. The Zohar's explanation is connected with the simple meaning of the verse, that Abraham didn't have any days that just passed by. He invested himself into every day to serve God every day as required on that specific day. Meaning, the simple literal meaning of coming on in years is about Abraham's physical life, that the events of every single day impacted him. The Zohar, as the inner dimension of the Torah, emphasizes the deeper meaning of Abraham's life, his spiritual life and divine service. This was Abraham's true life. To use the words of the founder of Chabad, the Alter Rebbe, quote, "The life of a holy person isn't the physical life, but the spiritual life." The Zohar therefore explains that Abraham came on in years, and they left an impact on him because all of his days were filled with divine service, and every day was a, quote, living day. So the simple meaning and the Kabbalistic meaning are actually intertwined. The Zohar explains that the words coming on in years, in the spiritual sense, that all of Abraham's days were filled with Torah and mitzvahs. This complements the simple explanation that coming on in years means that Abraham came into his days and took them seriously. Because Abraham took his days seriously, he filled them with Torah and mitzvahs. And because every moment of his life was infused with Torah and mitzvahs, was infused with holy purpose, therefore he took life seriously. It goes hand in hand. A short story which the Rebbe related once in a talk in 1965, which is related to this idea. This was in context, so there might be a detail in the beginning which you might not understand. It's okay. The story is the main point. Something that Reb Michoel would always repeat to the students, perhaps there are those present who heard it from him, the Rebbe said at the gathering, is that when studying Chassidus, the Chassidic philosophy, it cannot remain abstract. One needs to know that those words are intended for them, for you. He gave an analogy. There were once Yeshuvniks, Jews who were, in order to learn a living, lived in towns with few or no other Jews. With time, being disconnected from Jewish society and Jewish community, and with no ability to study in Jewish schools, there were some who, despite their great piety, lacked basic Jewish knowledge and couldn't even read Hebrew. Once, a Yeshuvnik received a letter from far away, and since he couldn't read, he asked the Melamed to read it to him. What does that mean? It means that the custom then was that several Yeshuvniks banded together and hired a teacher, or in Hebrew, a Melamed, for their children. The teacher would be located somewhere between all the towns at like a central point, so all parents in the area could send their children. Okay. When the Melamed, the teacher, began to read the letter, it turned out the letter was saying that the Yeshuvnik's father had passed away. When he heard that, the Yeshuvnik fainted. Reb Michal would conclude and tell his students, it doesn't make any sense. The Melamed read the letter, and the Yeshuvnik can't read at all. Logically, the one who could read and understand the letter, he's the one who should have fainted. Not the one hearing secondhand. Who fainted? The Yeshuvnik, not the Melamed. The answer is obvious. The answer is that to the Melamed, this was talking about a stranger. But to the Yeshuvnik, this was his father. The analogy is obvious, the Rebbe said, and ended off. When one learns Chassidus and thinks that this is someone else's father, so to speak, they may learn Chassidus, read and understand everything it says perfectly, but they will not faint. They will not be affected personally. However, even if one who merely hears their friends learning, but realizes that the context is directed at them personally, it is their Father in heaven, they will faint. They will be affected in a positive way. I mean, in the lesson is a positive thing. So the lesson is simple and powerful. We need to take life seriously. We need to take things seriously. We need to take Judaism seriously. We must understand that everything that happens in our life is of vital importance, something that will inevitably affect us in the strongest way possible. Abraham was very affected by his life because he took it so seriously. He knew there was purpose and meaning. So everything that happened in his life and had meaning in his eyes, and he took it to heart. Even at 138, he still took it to heart. We all have a mission and purpose, one we're meant to fulfill during the course of our lives. Everything that happens to us is of critical importance, and we have to take it to heart and act accordingly. Like the one who reads the letter about their own father, not one who reads it about a stranger. In a class with participants, I would usually at this point ask any questions. But if you have any questions, you can just send them off to me at my email. Okay. And I will answer to the best of my ability. Section B, the meaning of life. First, we're going to quote Genesis chapter 23, verse 1. So we spoke about Abraham coming on in years. What about Sarah? She's the main topic of our Torah portion, although it briefly mentions her in the Torah portion in the beginning, but really, in a big way, it is about her. Again, that's a different discussion, not for now. Source 3. The life of Sarah was 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. Now you might ask, why does it say 100 years and 20 years and 7 years? It could have just said 127. There's a reason for that. Not for now. Rashi, the famous commentator, explains, the years of the life of Sarah all were identically good. When the verse tells us the years of the life of Sarah, the meaning behind those words, why is it saying it, is to indicate to us that they were equally good from beginning to end. Says the Rebbe, the name of this Torah portion is Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. All of the 127 years of Sarah's life are summarized with this single title, the life of Sarah. In the words of Rashi, all of her years were identically good, like we just read. So the Torah portion begins with the life of Sarah, what the life of Sarah was. We can deduce from this that the Torah relates to all of Sarah's many years of life as a single unit, the life of Sarah. As Rashi emphasizes, all of the years of Sarah's life were identically good, and there was no difference between age 7, age 20, and age 100. Says the Rebbe, how can all of Sarah's 127 years be lumped together under one title as identical? Over the course of these 127 years, there were radically different periods. Certainly, we can't compare the period of Sarah's life in Ur Kasdim and Haran, even though Sarah was occupied with converting the women there to belief in God, as Rashi explains. We can't compare that to her spiritual status after fulfilling the divine command, go out for yourself from your land to the land that I will show you. And then to the apex of her spiritual status, when she heard of the binding of Isaac. This was a complete transformation from one extreme to the other. How then can we summarize all of Sarah's 127 years with the single title of the life of Sarah? How can we take all these radically different experiences, one extreme to the other, really, really good, really intense, really hard, really difficult, really bad, all into one container, one container, the life of Sarah? I laughed because inside joke. But who you know the waffle and the spaghetti analogy from Rabbi Yossi Jacobson. Okay. The explanation is that the life of Sarah refers to the matters with which Sarah lived. The matters, the things that energized her. That's what it means. It doesn't mean, again, the physical life on the calendar or the passport. It means the things that she lived with, the things that gave her energy. This was identical throughout all the years of her life. It didn't change. And this is why all of her 127 years are given one title. The life of Sarah doesn't refer to her physical lifespan, but to the meaning that filled her life, the things that she lived with. Her entire life, she lived with the same content, the same meaning, the same purpose, the same goal. Says the Rebbe, even a simple Jew understands that the true content and meaning of Sarah's life didn't lie in matters like eating breakfast or lunch. These weren't the things she lived with. Her true life certainly wasn't expressed when she was in the homes of Pharaoh and Abimelech, because the fact that great kings praised her beauty and took her for themselves didn't mean a thing to her. Moreover, it caused her indescribable pain and suffering. What business does a Jewish woman have with a non-Jew? And certainly a woman like our matriarch Sarah. The Rebbe continues, the content and meaning of Sarah's life was expressed in the matters Rashi specifies in our Torah portion. What was Sarah's life? 3 things. Candles burning from one Friday to the next, as Rashi words it. A blessing in her dough, we're going to explain this in a minute, and a protective cloud of the divine presence hovering over her tent. These 3 matters represent the 3 commandments that are unique to Jewish women. This explains how all of Sarah's life can be summarized with one inclusive title. Over all the years of Sarah's life, throughout all the different circumstances she found herself in, the core value that she lived with was the same. It was constant. The true meaning of her life always was candles burning from one Friday to the next, a blessing in her dough, and a protective cloud of the divine presence hovering over her tent. The 3 pillars every Jewish home stands on. So the meaning in Sarah's life was Shabbat candles, kosher food, kosher kitchen, and family purity, the 3 pillars of the Jewish home. This is what a Jewish home is supposed to stand on. This is what really sustains a Jewish home. This was always the focal point of her life throughout all of its stages, youth, middle age, and old age. This is the lesson we learn from the Torah portion of Chayei Sarah, this week's portion. Every Jewish woman, even those that grew up distant from Jewish observance and practice, knows that her ancestor was our matriarch Sarah. It is clear to all, even to non-Jews, that the purpose of Sarah's life didn't lie in the matters that were of greatest importance to the non-Jewish women in the kingdoms of Pharaoh and Abimelech. To those women, the most important thing was wearing a beautiful dress and very high heels and so on. Sarah, by contrast, found her purpose in her Shabbat candles and other mitzvahs. This is a clear directive for every Jewish woman that as a daughter of Sarah, the core of her life should be the 3 pillars of Sarah's life. Candles burning from one Friday to the next, referring to the Shabbat candles which Jewish women light right before sundown. Candles burning from one Friday to the next, referring to the Shabbat candles, I just said that. A blessing in her dough, referring to the laws of kosher food. And a protective, by the way, just the plug, there's a book, I want to get it for our library. It's called, I think it's called Going Kosher in 30 Days. I think that's what it's called. A very, very informative and eye-opening book, and it helps making having more of a kosher home a reality. It's not so far-fetched, and it's something that is doable. Highly recommended. I hope I got the title right, and we hope to have it here soon. And thirdly, and a protective cloud of the divine presence hovering over her tent, referring to the laws of family purity and modesty. Even if a woman had a time during which she was lacking in this respect, as we'll see in a second, and not living like Sarah, she can change this and elevate herself to the level of conduct of Sarah. Of course, there's nothing wrong with dressing well. That's not the point. On the contrary, Jewish sources emphasize the value of a woman's beauty. The point is not to be immersed in this, not to be sucked up in this, and so make this the focal point of one's life. Every Jewish woman and girl knows that the focus of Sarah's life was spirituality, not materialism, and they should all strive to emulate her. Questions, you can forward them to me. We're almost done, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. Section C, last little bit, fixing the past. Fascinating little bit from the Rebbe here. Not only is it possible to change one's conduct for the future, it is even possible to repair the past conduct. This is a huge thing in Judaism. Repentance, which is a very archaic sounding, scary sounding word, returning to our roots is a little more proper description, I think. Returning to Hashem, returning to God, returning to our Judaism, our traditions. Return is very powerful. It's an incredible energy and power that God gave to a Jew that they can accomplish. It can even change the past. It's like a time machine. This can be achieved by acting with love for fellow Jews and influencing another Jewish woman to improve on her past conduct. In the book called Torah Or, the Alter Rebbe quotes the Zohar's teaching on the words Abraham was old, coming on in years, and the Zohar says, Be'inun yoimin Elohim, in these elevated days. This means that all days need to be complete, elevated. This raises the question, what are we to do with the days that were spent in negative circumstances? I didn't do exactly what I should have done, or it wasn't such a positive day for me. Similar to the period that Sarah spent in the homes of Pharaoh and Abimelech. The Zohar states that Abraham's days were all filled with meaning, right? They were complete with mitzvahs. But what happened on those days in his life when he was subject to negative circumstances? Were those days also filled with light and meaning? They certainly can't be considered complete and illuminated days. How then can it be said that about Abraham that he was coming on in years? Seemingly he had some days that were negative. The answer is, hear this, the answer is that when we act with love for our fellow Jews and influence those who are in an undesirable state to correct, and we influence them to correct their ways, God acts with us measure for measure. It's a huge rule in Torah, in Judaism. In reaction to this, God will repair and complete all our past deficiencies. As our sages say, you restored the soul of the poor person, I will restore your soul, says God. Measure for measure is a mode of conduct that is a logical imperative. Should the judge of the entire world not act justly? So the answer is that when Abraham influenced others to fill their lives with light, this rectified those days in his life that were lacking in light. God acts with us measure for measure. When we restore the soul of a poor person, God restores our soul. When we fill others' days with light, God fills our days with light. So if we have unfortunately had days of darkness in our lives, we shouldn't lose hope. We can still fix them. We can help others illuminate their days. And in return, God will illuminate our dark days. This last tiny bit is absolutely fascinating. It's the same point that we just said, but it's very practical because it's an actual story that happens. We don't have the actual details of the story, but we have the letter that the Rebbe responded to a particular lady. The Rebbe wrote this point in connection with the mitzvah of family purity. In a Jewish home, the husband and wife are supposed to have a particular kind of relationship. It's supposed to be a loving relationship and a solid relationship and a committed relationship, all based on the values of the Torah. Part of this is the mitzvah of Taharas HaMishpacha, family purity in English. This is the husband and wife following the laws of mikvah and preparing for mikvah, and the wife immersing in the mikvah and sticking to it. It's incredibly important, and it has tremendous effect on the family and the children that are born from this marriage. So a woman wrote to the Rebbe with a question close to heart. Her children were born before she became more observant, and she wasn't careful with the laws of family purity. Now, after learning their significance, how could she make up for the past? Can you imagine? A lady, she has children, and she learns more about Judaism later on in her life, and she learns about family purity, and she learns the importance of it, the significance of it, the crucialness, that's not a word, of it, and she feels like she messed up. She messed up her family, she messed up her kids, whatever. I don't know what kind of emotions she had. And she felt like she can't make it up. She wrote to the Rebbe a letter pouring out her heart, clearly. The Rebbe's response is incredible. This is from Igrot Kodesh. There's a very large set of volumes of books from the a compilation of the Rebbe's letters that he had written to people. This is from volume 20, page 97. You write as though this cannot be rectified, which is contrary to a fundamental principle of our holy Torah, that nothing can stand in the way of repentance. You think you can't fix it? You can always fix it. What are you saying? Most importantly, it is clear that the way to rectify a negative is through something positive, good, and holy, and not, God forbid, by another negative matter of sadness or worse, despondence, giving up. This is completely out of the question. What should she do? How could she fix this? What you should do practically is try to explain the laws of family purity to your friends and others in your area. The solution here is the same. In order to rewrite the past, to turn darkness to light, there's only one method: bringing light to another person. In that merit, God will brighten our lives and futures and even retroactively change the past. Wow, wow, wow. What a lesson. What a lesson. I loved it. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Wishing you all a good week. And I hope to see you next week in person. Come to the class in person. You'll enjoy it. It's an energetic experience. Over and out.